Hello, wrestling fans, and welcome back to 10 Count. I'm Steve Fall, but on today's edition, I am talking to the most dangerous man. It's Ken Shamrock. How are you doing today?
I'm well, brother. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Again, the last time we talked, we were talking about so many different things. Bare knuckle boxing. We talked about Impact Wrestling, the WWE. But today, I want to talk about back in October. There was a surprise. I'm watching Rumble on 44th Street, New Japan. I'm like, oh, this is a good show. I'm having fun. And then, wait a minute. Ken Shamrock has shown up at this event. How did this happen? How did this amazing moment come to be?
Well, they contacted and wanted to know if I want to come in and kind of do a spot in there. And I was like, yeah. And then I heard it with Suzuki, and I was like, oh, outstanding. I really thought maybe they were putting something together to start something between me and him because it's been so long since me and him have been able to really get in the ring and do anything. And so I really thought there was going to be something there, but unfortunately, it was just a spot.
Mm,
They told me that. No, we're just doing a spot. Just want to kind of give the fans a treat. So we went and did that, and it was fun to see him again. It was really awesome because he's one of the guys in the beginning that really helped sharpen my skills, along with Funaki. So it was great to be in there with him.
man, because I when I saw that, I was like, oh my God. Like, is Ken Shamrock coming back? We're going to see him destroy some people and rip some ankles off? Because you're not officially retired, right?
No, 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 not from wrestling. No.
All right. So when could we see you again in the ring beating somebody up?
We'll just have to wait and see. Right now, I am so focused on Valor. Really trying to get that promotion up and going. We have a great opportunity to be able to try to change the look of the bare knuckle sport, being able to clean it up, being able to make it look professional and bring it to the fans because I know they love it. The numbers show it. So it's just really packaging it so it's acceptable in mainstream.
Right, because obviously right now, if there's a show that airs, I think after AEW, and it's called Power Slap, and I don't think that's being accepted by the mainstream audience. But ratings are doing well. But what do you think about that? Since you're involved in a bare knuckle fighting organization, but yet you have rules, you have how we're gonna situate the fighters. This is I will stand there and I will slap you as hard as I can. Bare knuckle fighting completely different. How do you feel about this power slapping show, and is it suitable? Do you think it's like we should be watching this?
I can't control that. All I can do is basically, do what I want to do. And, even from the beginning, in the very beginning days with me, it's always been about competitiveness. It's always been about honor, integrity. And I've always lived that way. I've always fought that way. I've always trained people that way. And so for me, it's about focusing on something positive. And we got a lot of heat for bare knuckle in the beginning because people were saying, "Oh, that's so brutal and
Yeah.
barbaric," and it's like, but and even in the UFC when we first started doing it back in the beginning days, we got the same heat. Back in '93, where people were saying, "Oh, that's barbaric," because they didn't understand how much it took to get in there and train and be the technical stuff that it took to be good at it at a very high level. And so I think that with bare knuckle coming out, it's that same thing where people are not understanding how much technicality is technical it is to go in there and fight bare knuckle because you have to be more accurate than you would if you had a glove on. So therefore, you have to be more professional and be able to be a little bit more accurate with your striking because you break your hand. So to me, that's kind of my focus is be able to get people educated to what it is. As
Right.
far as slap boxing, that's not even in my vision, man. That's not something I'm looking at, not something I want to look at. I don't understand it, but if people are watching it, obviously it's people want to make money
Yeah.
and put business together. And if it's working, God bless them, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's something I won't touch.
Yeah. When I first saw that, I was like, oh my God, like again, it's something like a car crash. Unfortunately, you don't want to look at it, but then you see someone getting slapped the crap out of, and you're like, man, this is terrible. But is there more for me to watch? And,
Well,
and
it's
I,
no different than our media when they see all these bad things happening with police officers or with teachers or whatever it is, they show it. And
yeah,
even though it's bad, they get the most ratings because it's bad,
yes,
even though it's something that's not good, right? And everybody knows it. But It just seems like that's what sells. That's what people look at. Unfortunately, I don't know about the slap boxing thing. I don't understand it, and don't understand as a fighter.
Yeah.
I don't understand standing there and letting somebody hit you. I understand being hit, but it's only because somebody had to earn it,
Yes.
not stand there and let somebody do it. So, I don't understand it, but it seems to be doing whatever it's doing. I'm not paying attention to it, and
Yeah.
it's not in my vision. My vision is Valor bare knuckle and trying to bring a sport out there that people can enjoy and something that I'm accustomed to.
Yeah, you did bring up a second ago about in '93 how UFC was kind of painted in this light. Obviously, bare knuckle fighting, you're trying to change the way perception that people have of it. In UFC, go back to '93, I would walk into a room and say my father was watching, UFC, and he'd be like, "Oh, you can't watch this." And oh, well, then I want to watch it now. And then you'd see the tapes, when it existed at Blockbuster Video and all these locations. And you're like, oh my god, like I want to rent this because it was something beyond. Like, even like John McCain, he was very upset with it. ECW even suffered trying to get a pay-per-view because they were comparing it to UFC, saying, UFC is real, ECW must be real. So bare knuckle fighting, obviously you're still having this issue with people looking at it and comparing it to, say, back in '93, where if you have a perception, it's very hard to change the perception, don't you think?
Well, I think it is because you don't have the education yet.
Yes.
Just like UFC, when you educate them, they started understanding the level it took to get in there and do it. Then you started seeing that respect level rise. And then, so being able to educate medical facts about, brain damage and things of that nature, where they truly understand, well, wait a minute. Yeah, okay, it's more visually. It looks like it's worse because visually you see blood, you see broken bones, broken noses, and cuts. But when you actually educate over time, the amount of damage that your brain is taking with bare knuckle as opposed to with gloves on, you would see the numbers almost quadruple amount of shots to the brain with a glove on.
Wow.
And so it doesn't matter how hard the surface is on the outside that's hitting you. It doesn't. It matters how many times that brain inside your skull that's surrounded by fluid is being bounced off from the inside of your head. I can hit you in a pillow 100 times and then punch you 10 times with my fist and break your jaw, break your nose, and cut you. And in long-term damage, getting hit with that pillow 100 times would be more damage to you than those 10 punches.
Wow.
Because that brain only bounced off 10 times. That pillow was 100 times, which means that brain was bruised 100 times.
Wow. I think that needs to be a video. I honestly, I do think something needs to be explained to other people because, again, I look at it and go, oh, bare knuckle fighting. Like, okay, I get it. This is bare knuckle fighting. Obviously, they're trained athletes, so they know what they're doing. But again, like you said, like an outside eyeball might look at it and go, well, boxing seems safer. They're wearing gloves, or UFC is safer because they're wearing gloves. Like, just because you're wearing gloves doesn't mean it's safer. But in the perception, it looks like, oh, this is padded, so that's okay.
And it's education. It's really getting them to truly understand the makeup of the body, understanding what the damage takes from a glove or a bare knuckle. Once you get that out there, and that happens through actually doing events and educating people every year on the facts of things that are happening through those fights, and then you're able to use that fight platform to be able to educate people on what's really happening.
Yeah. I think UFC, though, was universally accepted once it started creating a ridiculous amount of money on Spike TV. And suddenly everyone was like, well, if there is damage, that's okay because we're making money. And usually people turn away from the law or the rules when money is involved. So I think Valor, educating is one thing, but I think once the ball keeps getting rolled and people realize, oh, wow, we can all make money off this as well and be educated, I think we'll be okay. And we'll see how that goes.
To add to that point is that when they put a glove on guys early in the UFC, they put those fingerless gloves on.
Yeah.
And I bought into it. It was like, oh, it's a lot safer. And I was like, oh, right on. So I remember wearing the glove. And then, when I broke my hand, and it didn't feel good, right? But then now they're going to put a glove on me because what they said was that they wanted to try to make it safer, But the reality of it is they were trying to protect the fighters that were fighting like 3 or 4 times in one night. So when they got into the finals, they didn't have hand damage. So they end up putting this small little pad on their hands so that the guys that were winning when they got to the finals didn't have a disadvantage going into the finals. So but truly what they did, and this is the message, was when they put the glove on, it was protect the hand, not the head, to
Right.
protect the hand.
Wow. Yeah, they used to have those giant tournaments. All those again, when I used to rent those tapes, it was just a giant tournament of just people beating the crap out of each other from different weight classes, different styles. Obviously, things have changed in weight styles and classes, but when I first remember watching it, it reminded me of like a Mortal Kombat Street Fighter situation where like some guy who's really tall is gonna fight some guy really small, and I was like, I wonder if who's gonna win. So that was always very interesting to see what happened there. But we are in the WrestleMania season. We're all pumped up for this huge event all week long in Los Angeles. There's going to be something from morning till night. So if you're going there, there's WrestleCon, there's WrestleMania, Impact, New Japan, everybody's involved that week. But your first WrestleMania was WrestleMania 13 as an enforcer. Oh, actually, I have the magazine right there. The magazine's right there. WrestleMania 13, Bret Hart, Stone Cold Steve Austin, originally not supposed to be the match, but it does happen. And then you are the enforcer. How does this come to be? Because obviously you're joining the company and suddenly they're like, hey, we want to introduce you in a different manner. You're going to be the enforcer in this match that went down and is still today probably the greatest WrestleMania match of all time. And you're in it.
It was a risk. I mean, they had to take a risk on that because I wasn't a pro wrestler. And going into that match, I didn't have any real experience, at least at that point. I did when I was a little about 5 years prior, 6 years prior to that, but not at this level.
Yeah.
So going into it, I truly didn't even know whether or not I was going to be able to do what I needed to do because referees are important in making sure matches go over because there's certain things they have to do to make sure those spots count. And I was in a few different situations where I had to make sure that happened. And when I go in there, I remember thinking, I don't know if I could do this. I don't know if I can pretend to be involved in this. And so I felt like, well, I've always been that guy. Well, I'll just jump in and just see what happens and go out there and perform the best I can. We'll just let the chips fall where they fall. And so I remember going out there and about 5 minutes into the match, I'm thinking to myself, man, I can't believe what I'm seeing here. I mean, I couldn't tell you the difference between what was happening when I was fighting in MMA as opposed to what they were doing in the wrestling room. It was so believable and so good how those guys were performing that I just lost myself in the match and it just became normal to me. And I truly believe that that's why people really put that WrestleMania 13 as one of the best wrestling matches ever. Up there with, not saying it was the best because I haven't been around that long, but people saying that it's right there with all of them. And I agree because I was in there and I couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah, that I think as someone I've been watching for a very long time, and I think that still goes down as, if not one of the greatest matches of all time, like top 10, WWE style, but obviously WrestleMania, it's got to be 1 or 2 on people's lists. Like it's not lower than 2. It's definitely, it's always 1 or 2. Though WrestleMania 14 though was your first big WrestleMania match, actually competing against some guy named Dwayne. The Rock. Yeah, the Rock. Well, the Intercontinental title. And technically, if we're not going to get into schematics here, you beat The Rock. You beat The Rock that evening. Unfortunately, your temper might have gotten a little bit beyond your level of excitement, and you just wouldn't let go of the ankle lock, which suddenly causes a disqualification, which means you lose the match, even though technically it already ended, and you are not the Intercontinental Champion. Now, how do you feel about this situation? Because was there a plan for you to win the belt at this event, or was it always the plan of, hey, you're going to be in this Nation of Domination storyline for like 5 months, but you're never going to get the belt?
Yeah, I from what I can remember, I don't remember ever being in a position where I didn't think I was going to win. I thought for sure that I was going to have those opportunities. So I mean, just the way that I thought that the way they created that with me and The Rock and the rivalry that we had was tremendous. Obviously, there were some things in there that I did that probably would have given me a better opportunity to keep the belt. But there's always a little truth to every story, and we're gonna have to leave it just there. I mean, I did get mad. There's a lot of stuff I did that I wish I could take back, but unfortunately, you can't do that. You got to live with what you've done. And I got angry at times. I got frustrated at times. Me and The Rock went at one another a lot. But at the end of the day, we were friends, right? I mean, like we were still friends, but it got physical in there.
Wow. A couple of potatoes being tossed around a little bit.
We were aggressive. You'll hear him talk about it all the time. It was one of the toughest guys he ever faced because we were both trying to reach the top, and we got aggressive and we got physical. And unfortunately, like you said, my temper a lot of times gets in the way because I'm used to being able to get what I want. And it didn't happen in a lot of times. I get frustrated or angry or whatever. But to this day, me and Rock are really great friends. He really helped me through wrestling just as I did him. I'm happy for him where he's at. And I'm happy where I'm at too, because I've gotten a lot of things that are going on for me too. So I'm pretty happy with Valor and the things that we're doing there. And
Yeah.
so, but again, like getting into wrestling, when you saw me in there, man, I was trying to be Ken Shamrock, the world's most dangerous man, and nobody's going to keep me from doing that.
No. And again, I think the rivalry of from 97, like at one point in Survivor Series, like 97, you eliminated everyone on the Nation of Domination. You destroyed everybody. And then the storyline building up was you taking out individual members of the Nation of Domination. A Royal Rumble, you fought each other. WrestleMania, you fought each other. Even later on in the year, you fought each other. So you and The Rock seem to always chase around each other. But then when we flash forward to WrestleMania 15, The Rock's in the main event for the world title against Stone Cold Steve Austin. You're still in the Intercontinental title run with Road Dogg, Goldust, and Val Venus. So again, you kind of brought up a little bit about frustrations a little bit. 1 year ago, IC title match. 1 year later, you are still in the Intercontinental title matches, but The Rock, who fought you a year ago, is now in the world title. So do you think that this WrestleMania 15 was kind of a breaking point for you, as in like, okay, I'm doing everything right, but why am I not going up?
Well, I don't know if I was doing everything right. I mean, like behind the scenes,
TV wise, it looked like you were doing everything right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of other stuff going on too. But again, like I said, the company's got to depend on you if you're carrying the strap, right? And for me, I had a temper. I was wild. And if I go up and I get that strap, can I represent the company properly? Am I going to lose my temper and beat somebody up severely and put them in the hospital? That's not going to represent the company well. So like I said, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes where, I was an aggressive guy and I was violent, and, being a wrestler, sometimes, you got to be able to control those things. And, guys like The Rock getting in the ring with me, and, even Undertaker, even Bret Hart, guys that I had gotten one shot with, those guys were, and I'm happy because an Invader were willing to go in there and go with me and take all the punishment, and take all the anger and stuff that maybe I put out there. But those guys are badasses too. So
yeah,
we were able to go in and have some good matches, and I didn't hear anybody complaining either. Nobody. It was a couple guys, but I'm not going to mention names. But those names that I mentioned, those guys were all stars.
Oh yeah, of course. You just named Mount Rushmore for a lot of people of wrestling. So everyone you talked about that you were in the ring with was very supportive of you as well, because it never seemed like
Those guys are tough. They're tough.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They're not cupcakes. They went with me, so they're tough guys.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I know Bret Hart lately, every time he talks about Goldberg, he takes a giant dump on him, and that's fine with me, because anyone who hurts Bret Hart and takes him out of the wrestling world deserves to be dunked on at any minute if he wants to. He's Bret the Hitman Hart. He's the greatest of all time. So
Yep.
if you want to take a shot at Goldberg, and it's actually turned into a bit of a joke anytime anyone makes like a meme or even a Valentine's Day card. It was like roses are red, violets are blue. I hate Goldberg. So do you. I was like, oh my God. I was like, Bret Hart.
That's blatant. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I like him. I have good friends with Goldust. I have been for a long time, but I just like everybody has things that happen to them, and that's their thing, and
Yeah.
so But again, like I said, I got no issues with him. In fact, I was friends with him. In fact, there's only like 2 people that I think I rubbed shoulders with wrong, but everybody else I was good with.
So again, you keep bringing up kind of like your attitude. Maybe people considered you a little violent, but at the same time, if you're given the moniker the most dangerous man, don't they know what they're buying when they bring you in as like someone who is, again, UFC? This is do or die situations. You need to beat somebody up to win this or make them tap. Wrestling, predetermined endings. So obviously, I remember a story about Kurt Angle. When he came in, the first thing he said was, well, I can't lose. And Vince McMahon was like, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, yeah, I can't lose. I'm an Olympic gold medalist. I can't walk in here and lose. So the same situation, did you feel like walking in that like you were underneath this impression that like, hey, I'll lose, but like it needs to be to someone legit versus me just going out there and getting pinned?
There wasn't ever any conversation about losing. It was always a conversation about program and
Mm-hmm.
what kind of programs that you were going to be in and what those programs were going to build, those different things like that. Because I already knew going in that in order for you to be able to reach a certain status, you got to be able to give a little bit.
Yes.
And then when your time is to take, then you get your opportunity to take and you make the most of it. So I didn't go in with any delusional thoughts that I was going to go in there and that I couldn't lose. I went in there understanding that that I had to lose, because otherwise, how am I ever going to have that comeback, or how am I ever going to get put over if I don't get in a position to where they want to see me win because I got screwed over somehow or another.
Right.
So, and then just to go back to your point about, going in there and knowing who I was and being tough, I was very fortunate. Guys like Vader, Bret Hart, Stone Cold and The Rock, and I could go on. There's a few others. Only, like I said, 1 or 2 guys that didn't want to wrestle with me because they didn't want to be aggressive. But everybody else was in there and they were ready to rock and roll with me. They didn't care. They wanted it to be aggressive. They wanted it to be physical, because to them it was more about getting the match over. And if people believed it was real, like Stone Cold and Bret Hart WrestleMania 13, then they're going to get a better show, and these guys are going to feel more better about themselves. So for them to get in with me, I think that was one of those they must do that. Like, they were asking to have matches with me because they wanted that physicality.
Nice. Yeah, I can't imagine being like I in my brain mentally I'm like, why if I see my name next to Ken Shamrock on the whiteboard of who you're wrestling tonight, I'm like, oh my, who's got their eraser? Can I get my name out? Because again, you were so intense in the ring, punching yourself in the face before you got in the ring and everything. And then there you are on the cover of the magazine too. Man,
Yeah,
that's a scary ass man. I don't want to mess with him. I don't want to mess with him. No,
that was
he's
intense. Yeah.
that's a close up too. It wasn't, what I mean. They could have taken a wide shot for you. They're like, let's just get right in here. But my God, though, again, people who got involved with you, SummerSlam '98, you were in a Lions Den match against Owen Hart. Again, Owen Hart, one of the greatest of all time as well. Unfortunately, we lost him early. But in this match, you are in this Lions Den, and it's Madison Square Garden, but you're in a different theater next to MSG. How does this concept come to be? Because obviously we all know your UFC background, but how does someone go, what we should do is kind of bring a piece of that into the wrestling world for you?
Well, I think that there was a thought, and I think Owen was all about that because he wrestled a little bit. He had the experience to be able to go in and be able to be physical, just like his brother Brett. They understood the physicality, but they liked it. They embraced it. And so being able to have that match with Owen in what we call the Lions Den match would be something like mixed martial arts. There's no ropes to bounce off of. There's no things to go outside the floor and take a break. Any of that stuff. When you were inside there, it was go. There was no resting holds. There was no wrestling moves. This was us going in there and putting on a fight. And so having it with Owen was awesome because he knew how to fight. He knew what he was doing. And so you saw us jumping off the side of those fences, being able to throw our bodies into one another, punching each other, throwing each other. There was no give in that floor. That was like being on the floor, being slammed, because there's no giving. And so we got physical, and just like we did in the Dungeons match, there was nothing for us to bounce off of. It was a fight. And we both knew going into it that we were going to have to fight one another. and be able to go in and have a great match. And then when we're all said and done, we shake hands, no matter what happens. And so we were able to do that. And again, like you said, we lost a great one because I think Brett, I think Brett and Owen and the Hart family are tremendous legacies to the wrestling sport. And to lose one of them is just it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, especially because as years have gone on, we'll like we bring up, say, the Hart Foundation Canadian Stampede match. What an epic pay-per-view! What an epic match! But when you think about all the people involved, Bret Hart's still here. Owen Hart's gone. British Bulldog's gone. Brian Pillman's gone. Anvil's gone. Like, that's 4 members of a 5-person team that forever will be remembered as some of the greatest characters of all time. And no longer are they here, and we can't hear their stories. All we can hear are the stories from people who knew them, like yourself, sharing them with us. So again, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of Owen Hart, because I think people always bring up Owen Hart versus Bret Hart as like who's better, and people always seem now people are leaning towards Owen Hart more than Bret, but it's so hard to decipher who's better in the microphone, who's better in the ring. But I always loved Owen Hart, and he was one of the best going.
Well, I think as far as uh, the character and personality, Owen by far. But as far as technicality and physicality, Brett.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Because again, when people talk about, we talked about earlier a little bit, wrestling Mount Rushmores, like what is the criteria? Is it most butts in seats, most t-shirts sold? Was it best matches? Like, there's too many categories in wrestling, just like in movies and television, to choose. It's like comedy, drama, horror, wrestling, same thing. There's different brawlers, high flyers, big men, small men. So either way. But at SummerSlam 99, though, you had kind of the same exact match, except with Steve Blackman, who I absolutely love your storyline with Steve Blackman so damn much. Another Lions Den match, but now it's a weapons Lions Den match. Let's raise the stakes a little bit. How do you feel about this? Because just like how your WrestleMania matches went, it was Intercontinental title, then a year later, Intercontinental title. Here, 98, Lions Den match with Owen Hart. Next year, Lions Den match, but with weapons, with Steve Blackman. So how are you feeling about kind of repeating yourself, but yet still and having a banger of a match, though?
Yeah, I do the same thing. Is I think everybody knows Steve Blackman is a badass. I mean,
Yeah.
like, he's a tough guy. And so I think that pairing him with me made sense because he was more of a martial artist. I was a mixed martial artist. So therefore, he knew how to use all those weapons. So they gave him an advantage by putting those weapons in there. But he had to work for them because they weren't just put there for him to take. He had to go up and get them.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was very creative. We were a part of that creativity. Being able to put those weapons in there, I thought it would add some spice to it. I thought it would give Steve a chance to win, because if he could get those weapons and he could use them properly, he could use them against me. But because of my ability with the grappling and the fights that I had, I was much better, with a hand-to-hand. Even though he was a black belt in karate, he was good at what he did there, but he was very limited on what he could do in the grappling situation. So being able to put those weapons up there would even things out to where if he could get it, then he could kind of even the match out as it start to go. So I was okay with that. And he did get him, and he did whoop me.
Yeah.
and like I said with The Rock when he threw the chair, and anybody else when they do something, I said, you better swing it, because I ain't selling unless it's effective. And so he did. He brought it. In fact, he broke the stick, if I'm not mistaken, over my head or back, one of the two, because the stick came apart. So those are physical matches, but that's the way I wanted it. And everybody that I worked with, and that's what I think people make a mistake with wrestlers, is I believe they miss the fact these guys are tough guys. Like, they can't go through this stuff and reach that level they've reached without taking some punishment and being able to get back up and keep going. And so when I went with these guys, and they knew the type of match that I was going to bring, because that's what Vince wanted to bring reality into the WWF. So everybody I went with knew that that's what was going to happen. And almost every single one of them were all fine. And they, not only did I give it to them, they gave it back to me.
Yeah, that you mentioned a second ago, that gunshot of a chair shot to your face by The Rock. people still show that, and they're like, I can't believe Ken Shamrock is still around, walking, speaking, and being fine. Because that, you listen to that, you see that. When they put those videos in do not try us at home video packages, unfortunately, that makes people want to try more. But yet that, how did you feel? You just said, if you don't bring it to me, I'm going to get angry at you. But it's like, that was too much bringing. I think he brought it.
No, it was, you know, we would not be talking about it today
True.
if I didn't say, "Hey, hit me in the face," and it ain't your responsibility, it's mine, but you swing it, and I'll take care of the rest. And that's how it was. And you know, like I said, me and Rock had some physical confrontations. Man, we went after one another because that's what people wanted, and and he knew who I was, and he asked the same of me, bring it, and so we did. That's why we respect one another to this very day, was because we took an ass whooping to each other, and that's what we wanted. And so that's why I think today people still talk about it, is because we weren't willing to water it down. We wanted people to understand that, listen, we're here and we're putting on a show, but we're still fighters.
Oh yeah, that right there. If anyone ever tries to question Ken Shamrock's anything, be like, excuse me, sir. Watch this video of his face being smooshed in by a steel chair, and you will take back any disparaging words against the greatest man who ever took a chair shot, Ken Shamrock. Just want to say that, because that right there is scary to see, that you're still just sitting here chit-chatting with me like nothing ever happened, but yet it was like an imprint of your face in that chair. I wonder
Yeah,
if they
and there was no blood. I didn't get cut. There was no blood.
just a crushed in smush face. That's all.
Just smashed my skull for a minute, but it was fine. My front of my skull is the hardest. I believe the thickest part of your skull is the forehead.
Well, at least he hit you there then, because if he hit you somewhere else, we might be talking about a different story right now. Though
Yeah.
you did win the tag team titles with the Big Boss Man, and the Big Boss Man actually is the person that got me into professional wrestling as a channel surfing, when you could channel surf back in the day when it was only like 60 channels, and I saw it, oh, whoa, what's this going on? What's this police officer doing, beating people up? I love it so much. In today's world, you don't want to see that on TV. But then, and then it was great. It was fun. He was a good guy. He was beating up bad guys. He wasn't beating up good guys. So what was that like, working with the Big Boss Man? Did you actually ever travel together? Because you hear stories about tag team champions, or tag teams not traveling together. They're just business partners on TV.
Yeah, by that time I was already traveling with Ryan Shamrock and Road Dogg, Billy Gunn, Steve Blackman. Those were the ones that I traveled with. And then Flying Brian Pillman. I when he first came back, I was driving. I drove him around
Wow.
because I was new, so I was driving him around when I first got there. Or when he first got there. I was already there for a minute, but I ended up driving him around to place. But those are the guys that I actually travel with. And usually when you're there, you usually have a few people that you travel with because you're talking with them and that you're setting up rides and arrangements. But Boss Man was another one that was a good one. He was, I mean, I don't know how he was, in the beginning, but I know when he was there with me and in the tag team, he was a good dude. Straight up business, very I would say focused on his craft. And so for me, I thought it was a good run. I mean, especially switching from Owen to Boss Man. It was a pleasure, man. And those are good memories because, we lost Boss Man, the dude also. So, two guys that I tagged with, we lost both of them. And in my opinion, both of them were very good people.
Yeah, the Big Boss Man too, when he came back into the WWE, he was wearing a whole different, he was like wearing SWAT gear, and he lost a ridiculous amount of weight. And if you go back to watching the Twin Towers versus the Mega Powers, Akeem and Big Boss Man, Macho Man, Hulk Hogan, the size of this man, and then you see him coming back in '98 as a Vince McMahon henchman, and you're like, holy crap, that's the Big Boss Man? He looks amazing.
Yeah.
He was half the size.
Him and Invader, again, another guy we lost. I've worked with a lot of different guys that we've lost. So, and being able to know the physicality and the agility that both those big men had was amazing.
Yeah. Again, Big Boss Man, one of my all-time favorites, and he knew how to use that billy club. That guy could throw that shit around and catch it over his head. It was like a magician. I don't know how he did it, But he
Yeah.
did it. He was a talented son of a gun. Though you did fight for the world title a couple different times, but one time, this is like I think your only time you main evented a pay-per-view, Lowell, Mass. Springfield, Mass. It was in '97 December. It was the D-Generation X In Your House pay-per-view. Ken Shamrock versus Shawn Michaels. This is a month after the Montreal Screwjob. And obviously, you've been talking such good words about Bret Hart. Now you're in the ring with Shawn Michaels. Underneath the impression going into that, what was being talked about in the locker room about the Montreal Screwjob? Because are you on the side of Bret Hart? Are you on the side of Shawn Michaels? Where are you landing in this argument heading into this matchup?
I wasn't on the side of anyone. You know, and if, in my opinion, that's not what it was about. It was a side of right and wrong.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what went on with Bret Hart and Vince. I know Bret wanted to have a match. He wanted to drop the steel program. He dropped the strap to me. There was talk about that. I don't know if that was ever relayed, but that's what Bret had said something to me about that. And I was like, oh, cool. That's an honor, you know. And then we did the matches and stuff, and then the screw job happened, and I remember just to myself was like, how can we do that? Bret may have been wrong in everything he did behind the scenes. I don't know.
Right.
But I do know when you're in the ring and you're working, you have to trust that other guy. You have to trust the referee. You have to trust the other wrestler in order for you to make it out of there safe. Because you look at Owen Hart, you look at Draws, you look at a lot of guys that trust the other guy to make sure that they're able to do their job. And sometimes when they don't, seriously bad things happen to you. And to me, that's where I aligned myself. Was, wait a minute, I'm giving you my body. I'm giving whoever walks into that thing with me my body, because I believe from the top down that they're responsible for making sure that we have a great match and everybody comes out of there safe and not get injured. Because at this level, with everything we're doing in there, it's very, very dangerous. If you have somebody that wants to screw you over, you could seriously be ending your life or be paralyzed or get hurt very badly. And so that's the side I took, was like, how do I trust this now? How do I move forward knowing what I know? Like, from the top down, this was orchestrated because, and I don't know everything that went on, that Bret wasn't going to drop it to Shawn.
Yep.
Now, I didn't know any of that stuff that was happening about what was going on with Shawn. I knew they didn't like each other. I knew when they went in to wrestle, they didn't trust each other. But whenever they walked in and wrestled, they trusted one another to make sure they did their job. That's what I know. When that didn't happen, my thought was, these guys are huge stars. And if they can do that to them, if they get pissed at me, or if I just say I don't want to, which I have in some circumstances, saying I didn't want to do something because it didn't look right, what are they going to do to me? Like, what can happen to me? Because Bret Hart is not as dangerous as I am. You know, if I say I'm not doing something, nobody's going to go in the ring and screw me over because I'll twist them in a knot, right?
Yeah.
So how far will they go in order to do something to me if I decide, which I wouldn't, but they don't know that, right? And so that's kind of where my mind went. And it's not fair to the organization, Vince, and anybody in the organizations that I was thinking that way, because you know that was a different situation with Bret and all them. So I don't know everything that went on, and I still don't to this day, and don't want to. But I took something in my mind and I let it fester, and I built this distrust towards everyone, and that's why things started going south for me after that. Was because I had this distrust going into the ring, and I wasn't as focused, or as I guess I wasn't as focused on my craft at that time. I started to veer off. I started to do other things. And a lot of it had to do because of that. It just felt like we were a tight knit group. Everybody was working together. We trusted, and all of a sudden it just blew apart that one night for me.
Right.
And again, that's my issues. It had nobody ever in the office ever gave me a reason not to trust them. They didn't. But that situation really made me feel uncomfortable.
Interesting you bring that up because I think that's one of the angles no one's ever really looked at was we always talk about Brett and Sean's perspective, Vince McMahon, Vince Russo, Jim Cornette, everybody involved, Earl Hebner. We never talk about, for instance, yourself, all the wrestlers who work there, because technically this seems like an unhealthy work environment now where you cannot trust your managers or your bosses or the people who are supposed to keep you safe because they have lied to you. What will stop them from lying to Ken Shamrock or The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin based on we don't like their attitude? Because this isn't the first time people have been screwed over before. This is not the first time. This has happened. It happened with Wendy Richter and not Medusa, Moolah back in like '86. It's happened. It has happened multiple times, but this was the biggest one on the I guess at the time because it was a WCW versus WWE war. Everyone was clued into what was happening because of the internet. There was no internet, back in '86. So that's very interesting you bring that up, that the distrust has begun because of what you just saw happen to Bret Hart, the company
Well,
man.
if I'm not mistaken, Owen ended up having his thing happen after that, right?
Yes. So 97, November 97 is Montreal Screwjob. I think it's May 99 is when Owen Hart ends up passing away, unfortunately, due to a failed trigger on his jumpsuit when he was coming down from the rafters. So that is, I guess, and I've talked to people about this where he seemed Owen Hart didn't seem like he wanted to do what they were discussing. But again, I didn't work there, so I don't know the exact details. All I know is he said, she said, and underneath the impression of, hey, we want you to do the superhero thing because he was coming down from the rafters, Owen Hart that was, but he would take him like minutes to unhook his vest and undo this. So it was wasting TV time. So the idea was, let's give you a quick trigger so you can pull on this thing and you're out of your vest instantly.
Not a quick trigger, but a professional trigger.
Right. But the rumor was there's many rumors. One was like it was used like fishing wire, like something very simple, just go boop. And again, I'm not Owen Hart, and no one knows Owen Hart, so we don't know what happened up top. We just know people got sued, people lost their lives. It's an unfortunate event. So I
And
was just,
happened after the screw job of Bret Hart. So
yes,
not, as a and you hit spot on when you say we hear it from Bret, we hear it from Sean, we hear those things and from other people writing the program, whatever, the referee that was involved. But what about all the people that are surrounding that are working in the company
yeah,
that have just saw this happen? And now you're moving forward with the idea and the trust that it's not going to happen to you.
yeah, yeah. Even heading into WrestleMania 14, Shawn Michaels, there were rumors that he was not going to cooperate with Stone Cold Steve Austin and lose the belt that night. And so you're thinking like, okay, we just had a screw job in December 97, we're rolling into March 98. Are we going to have a situation? Undertaker apparently is backstage and he's ready to go out there with he has tape on his hands. We're going right back to where we were before. He's got tape on his hands to protect his hands from punching Shawn Michaels in the face if he didn't cooperate, losing to Steve Austin with Mike Tyson as the enforcer as well. So there was a lot going on that year, a lot going on. But again, the perspective of the mistrust, I never really thought about until right now we're talking to you because again, Mankind said he quit the next day and then they convinced him to come back. Like there are many, many stories of people being like, I have to get out of here because this was awful. But yet they all
It,
stayed and made money
it,
and
it was unexpected. I mean, it was a shock.
right.
I liked Sean, and then when we had our match, we had a great match. I mean, it was nothing against Sean. I never ever had anything against Sean, but Brad was the guy that was really working with me. He's the one that worked with me. I went to his home. I worked with him for a while
Oh, wow.
before I had the match with Vader to prepare myself for what I was going to be getting into. And so Brett helped me understand that. And so yeah, but that was in WWE's or F's supervision. They were the ones that made that happen. So they put me with them for a reason. And then all of a sudden this happens, and now all of a sudden I'm like, uh, that's not right. Like, I
Right.
don't know what he did before. Maybe he was wrong or whatever he was doing, but I'm telling you, what happened in that ring was wrong.
Yep. Yeah, there again, you can be this forever. There's still tweets, there's still polls, there's still podcasts like this one. There's still videos everywhere in the world. Whose side are you on? Who is right? Who is wrong? All I
There's no
know is
right. It's
I,
right and wrong.
it's like I don't know. We don't know what happened backstage. All we're hearing is when Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart get interviewed, they'll share their thoughts on those moments. But how much truth is really there? Because over years, your stories change through your mind of was I right? Was I wrong? I don't know. All I know is Shawn Michaels, though, left the company about 4 months later after the screw job over an injury. So in reality, maybe that wasn't the best decision kicking Bret Hart out of your company. Maybe.
Yeah, well, and again, when you look at it, there, and that's why I try to, in the way I look at things, you don't look at what people say, you don't look at what people do, you look at the situation and you say, is that right or wrong?
Right.
Is that right or wrong? Forget about everything that goes on, but in that situation, when it happened, was that right or wrong?
Yeah. I was a fan of both, and I was very sad to see Bret Hart leave. And I didn't follow him to WCW. I did not increase their ratings. I don't think anyone increased their ratings because from that point on, they made him they brought you in as an enforcer your first time around because you didn't have the experience yet to have a match right away. Bret Hart experienced 15 years in the business. What did they do to him? First thing in WCW, what did they do? Made him a fucking referee. Sorry for swearing, but that was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Hey, what should we do with you? You're the best wrestler in the world. Be a referee your first time around.
Yeah, like, oh, that's an impact.
Yeah, $3 million for you, my friend. But hey, can you count to three? 1, 2, 3. Cool. That's
Good.
great. Great. That was awful.
Simple,
Simple stuff.
simple, stupid.
Oh God, man. Ken, you get me all hot. Now I'm getting violent. Now I'm getting angry. I'm gonna knuckle shuffle someone in the face. But God, it's getting hot in here. It's getting hot. But I just want to say, it has been a pleasure talking to you today, Mr. Ken Shamrock. It always is a pleasure talking to you. Second time I'm talking to you, and it's always a good time because you share your thoughts, you share your perspective. We talked about WrestleManias, SummerSlams, Owen Hart memories, the Montreal Screwjob, which did not think I'd be talking about that today. I was like, oh, let's talk about him versus Shawn Michaels. And we veered off, and I'm glad we did because the idea of what happened between two wrestlers affected an entire locker room, and no one talks about that ever. So I'm glad we did today. Maybe other wrestlers will come forward and share their thoughts and feelings on this as well, because it obviously affected hundreds of people, not just fans, professional wrestlers. With, do you trust someone, do you not trust someone? But all in all,
and too, I want to make sure that anybody that's interested in knowing what Ken Shamrock is up to these days, you can go to valorbk.com, doing a Valor bare knuckle league. So come join us.
Yeah. And also, before we go, I was looking at your podcast. When are we going to get new episodes?
Yeah, about time. We just did one yesterday, and we're going to finish it up next week. So we'll have another one out in about 2 weeks.
Awesome. Because I went there and I was like, the last one was in December. We are recording in February, and I want more.
Yeah.
I need more Ken Shamrock in my life. So hashtag more Ken Shamrock.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you so much for being here on 10 Count. I've been Seafall. He's the most dangerous man. Don't piss him off or he'll break your ankle. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.